I want to thank you all for coming today on the International Day of Peace, which in and of itself is a relatively new, at least it had gotten a shot in the arm, to become a much more well-known and important day to talk about these issues. I also want to thank Drexel University, the Drexel International Program, and the Project for Nuclear Awareness for inviting me to speak today. And I want to thank Bill also for that wonderful talk. And I was busy taking notes thinking, great, that's going to plug into what I want to say, plays into what I want to say here. So I think he did a fabulous job just giving us an overview. And I second what Ed said about reason to feel optimistic. I'm a professor at Chestnut Hill College, you know, I talk about a lot of different issues. Occasionally, after we'll get done talking about maybe the environmental challenges that are facing us, or the Middle East is a good one for starting to feel depressed about whether things can ever change there. And sometimes I'll get a student raise their hand and say, holy cow, I'm just so depressed. Is there really any hope? And I'll say, yes, are you kidding me? I said, you know, one of the most unlikely things that ever happened in my lifetime, and that is the peaceful end of the Cold War. And I'll say, if I could somehow go back in time during the early years of the Reagan administration and somehow write an article that the Cold War will come to an end, not with a mushroom cloud, but peacefully with the implosion of the Soviet system. And first of all, it would have been a challenge to get that accepted anywhere. I would have been labeled a nutcase. But boy, would I be sitting pretty in terms of my professional career, because, you know, that's what happened. And, you know, so a very highly unlikely event actually did come to pass. And actually, that's what a preview of where I'm going to get, you know, in discussing with my talk today. My research is on the vision of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and I want to talk about the predominant strategy that's been used to try to get to the goal, which is the total elimination of nuclear weapons. And, you know, I guess my punchline and the thing I'm going to leave you with is, you know, strange things can happen, and we should never, you know, rule out that, you know, the vision can be achieved. I wasn't sure how many people would really know about this treaty. It really is the nexus of arms control agreements, several efforts to achieve global nuclear zero. And if we could move to slide 2. I put up here what many people call the grand bargain. It shows basically the two sides of the treaty. On the one hand, the treaty prohibits the non-nuclear weapon states, countries who do not currently have nuclear weapons, the signatories who do not have nuclear weapons, are prohibited from acquiring these weapons. On the other hand, it also requires states which have nuclear weapons to negotiate in good faith toward global zero. So there are two parts of the treaty, and I have them on the slide. And they represent the grand bargain that underpins really disarmament efforts. It's a foundational understanding. Okay? It's a way for us to try to move from our current situation where some states have nuclear weapons, many states do not, and to try to achieve global nuclear disarmament. Now I want to draw your attention to the arrow in my slide. It's going both ways. I'm trying to indicate here that the success for one side of the bargain depends on success in the other side. There's a holistic quality to this treaty. So, for example, if you start to have current non-nuclear weapon states acquiring nuclear weapons, states that have nuclear weapons may say, well, geez, the other side's not keeping their bargain. In fact, we may need to keep our nuclear weapons. Let's not work in that direction. Or, if the states that have nuclear weapons, if they make only token efforts to disarm, or even if they start to increase their stockpiles, then the non-nuclear weapon states tend to say, well, we're keeping our side of the bargain, but look, these guys are not keeping their side. And we're acquiescing to become second-class powers. powers here. We're saying we're giving up our nuclear stockpiles, but the nuclear weapon states are not getting rid of theirs, as the treaty requires. We don't want to put ourselves in a permanent inferiority status. So the grand bargain of the treaty that I'm highlighting here really helps to illustrate the tensions that we can see in terms of trying to achieve global nuclear disarmament. Now, the Non-Proliferation Treaty it came into force in 1970. It's now over 40 years old, and it can claim some really notable successes. For example, it is the most universally subscribed to treaty. Almost all countries in the world are members of the treaty. Presently, there are only 4 countries which are outside the treaty. Those would be India, Pakistan, North Korea, and Israel. Every other country in the world is a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The other thing to point out is that since the treaty has come into force, this spread, the proliferation of nuclear weapons, has been slow, at least as compared to what was feared in the 1960s when the states were moved to negotiate this treaty. The early 60s, it was projected that we, by the 70s, might be looking at 15, 20 nuclear states. Well, until 1998, the 5 original nuclear states that were signatories to the treaty, those 5 were still the only nuclear states. Now, since 1998, we've had 4 other states, well, I'm sorry, I'm misspeaking, 3 other states have become nuclear. Israel has been sneaky, doesn't admit to having nuclear weapons, but it's commonly believed that they have quite a nice stockpile. In fact, can we go to the next slide? Here I have just to refresh everyone's memory, the current status of the nuclear club. So the first 5 states are what we call the avowed nuclear states. Those are the ones that had nuclear weapons by the time of the signing of the Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1968. Still do. The next 3 are the newer members of the club. And then the likely nuclear state, Israel, since about 1967. Their program is shrouded in a lot of mystery, but you can see basically where the current stockpiles now stand. In my chart here with the Americans and the Russians, they clearly have the lion's share of nuclear weapons on the planet. And distinguish between the first number in the little fraction there are the operational weapons, but they are part of a larger stockpile, either weapons in reserve or weapons that are slated for destruction. So you can see for that latter category, we're looking at many thousands of nuclear weapons that are still around, and the situation could be reversed. Also, just to mention, if you look there in the first column, you can see, well, the first 5 states are members of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They have that status of, we are nuclear weapon states, we are enjoined to negotiate in good faith towards global zero. The other 4, though, 3 of them have never been members. North Korea used to be a member, but has withdrawn. I also threw up there members of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, which is a treaty that tries to get states to agree that they will not do any testing of any new weapons or current weapons in their stockpiles. You can see the status of